Hello everybody, I am Dr. Parul Malhotra, Associate Professor, Jagannath University, Jaipur, Rajasthan. In continuation to the previous videos related to the media audience, we are now studying the concept of active and passive audience in this video. We'll learn about the two different types of audience, active and passive. The concept of an active audience in media refers to the notion that media consumers are not passive recipients but actively engage with media content, interpret it, and create meanings based on their own experiences, knowledge, and perspectives. Instead of being influenced solely by media messages, active audiences play an active role in shaping their media experiences and constructing their understanding of the world. Active audience refer to those who actively receive media information and make sense of the messages based on their social and personal context. They listen to the media messages instead of hearing them. What is the difference between listening and hearing? Hearing is you are just surpassing certain content, that is, you something just hear that you find interesting, whereas listen is hearing it deeply, trying to understand what the content is actually wanting to convey. This is what is listening. That is, you are trying to understand the deeper perspective of the content, whereas the hearing is the superficial thing that is just can be done even by passing by something. But to listen something, you have to sit, you have to understand, you have to act upon. However, active audiences receive media information actively, but the act of receiving media information is unintentional. So, the active audiences pay full attention to receiving information and interpret them to give the feedback. The most common listening styles are people, content, action, and time oriented listening. Here are some key aspects of the active audiences in media. Interpretation and the meaning making. Active audience interpret media messages based on their personal backgrounds, values, and belief. They actively construct meaning from media content by applying their own culture, social, and individual frameworks. See, newspaper is read by many people, and even the television content, the cinema content is seen by lot many peoples. Many of them they react, and some they just watch it and leave or forget. So those who actually react, those who actually try to make meanings from the content, or maybe they objectify the content, or if they like even the content, they try to make others also understand what is the good thing about the content. So they are the active audience, and those they are those people who actually listen. And the passive audience is somewhat those who are not very active, and they just hear the content, they just watch the content, and they just are not interested in giving their any kind of feedback, or they don't want to apply their own cultural, social, and individual frameworks. I hope you understand now. Selective exposure and media choice. Active audience exercise agency in choosing which media to consume. They actively seek out specific media channels, platforms, or content that align with their interests, preferences, and information needs. Selective exposure refers to the audience's tendency to favor media content that conforms their existing beliefs or matches their interest. In a group of friends, you will always find people, those who always impose their choices in doing anything. So they are the active members of the group, and some members are like passive members, and those who are not interested and just go with whatever the group wants to do, and they do not usually give their own choices. They are okay with everything, they have no objection in anything, so they are the passive members. So similar thing lies for the media content also. In a family also, many people they always insist on watching a particular channel, and they are those who actually decide which uh, which channel will watch, or which newspaper will be subscribed, or which particular magazine will be subscribed, and if the family is going out to watch a movie, then which movie to watch. And some are the passive members. They are nothing to say, they are okay with whatever the news channel is running, whatever the newspaper is being subscribed, or whatever the film they are going to watch. So they are not considered. So this is what the concept of active passive says, and this is what the concept of selective exposure and the media choice says. Then the engagement and interaction. Active audiences engage with media content through various means, such as discussing it with others, sharing opinion on social media, or participating in online communities. They may provide feedback, comments, or critiques, contributing to the ongoing dialogue surrounding media content. Resistance and negotiation. Active audiences may resist or challenge media messages that conflict with their views or values. They may critically evaluate media content, identify biases or inaccuracies, and engage in dialogue to negotiate alternative interpretation or challenge the dominant narratives. Again, active audiences are too much engaged with the media content, and they usually provide their feedback, comments, or critiques, and they are also there to engage in the dialogue if something is wrong, and they want to negotiate it with it, and they resist something which is not good, conflicting their own values or the society's value. Active audience possess media literacy, that is, they know about media a lot, and they know about how the content is being written, how the content, how things are being done. So this is what like we had also studied the concept of opinion leaders. So you can say most of the opinion leaders are the active audiences, as they have to be very, very up to the date, up to the mark, and they should have the knowledge of what is going around in the industry or the world related to their field. So most of the opinion leaders are active audiences. They possess media literacy skills, which enable them to critically evaluate and analyze media messages. Media literacy empowers individuals to navigate the media landscape, identify potential biases or manipulations, and make informed decisions about media consumptions. Then is the participatory culture. Active audiences are increasingly engaged in participatory culture, where they actively contribute to the creation, distribution, and modification of media content. Through user generated content, social media platforms, and online communities, audiences have the opportunity to produce their own media, remix existing content, and collaborate with the others. So, active audience have a lot of information about media literacy and the latest media trends, and they are able to critically evaluate and analyze all the kinds of media messages. And they also have a participatory nature, that is, they also want to contribute to the creation, distribution of the media content, and they always look for the opportunity where they can produce their own content using the existing media content. So, the concept of an active audience challenges the traditional notion of passive media consumers, and it recognizes the agency and active role of individuals in the media consumption process. It acknowledges that audience members are not passive recipients of media messages, but rather active participants who actively engage with media content, shaping their own media experiences and interpretations. For example, people are the active audiences who comment on the social media content to express their opinions. I hope you are understand with the concept of who are active audience, right? Then let us look at the passive audience and what are their characteristics. The concept of passive audience in media refers to the traditional view of media consumers as passive recipient of media messages who are easily influenced and have limited agency or engagement in the media consumption process. In this perspective, the audience is seen as relatively powerless and susceptible to the persuasive effects of media content. Passive audiences refer to those people who watch and observe the media information without making sense. Hence, they are recognized as inactive receivers. Passive audience have low motivation to process information, low ability to process information, and focus on simple cues. Example, the appearances instead of the content. They just go by the looks and they do not understand what the content is actually telling them. They are limitedly engaged in the media consumption process, that is, they are just simply watching and hearing. They are not much susceptible to the persuasive effects of media. They are okay with whatever the content is being shown. For example, there are many people who are active on social media, but they usually do not like to comment on that particular content. Here are some key characteristics associated with passive audience in media. First is the absorption of media messages. A passive audience tends to accept media messages at face value without critically evaluating or questioning them. They are more likely to be influenced by the content presented to them without actively engaging in interpretation or analysis. Limited interaction and feedback. Passive audiences typically have minimal interaction or direct communication with media producers. They consume media content in one-way communication model where the audience receives information without the ability to provide immediate feedback, or they engage in the dialogue. That is, they absorb. They usually do not absorb the media messages. They are not influenced by any kind of content, and they have a minimal interaction or any kind of communication with the media producers. They have minimal media choices. As active audiences, they make media choices. These are the people, those who accept the choices made by the active audience. A passive audience may have limited control over media choices due to factors such as limited access to diverse media sources or lack of awareness about alternative options. Reasons can be much. I also myself consider as a passive audience. Why? Because I hardly make any media choice. Whatever there is running on the television, whatever the newspaper is subscribed, I'm entirely okay with it, and I hardly post anything on social media, or I hardly comment anyone's status. And this does not make me dumb, this does not make me less active as a person, but for media I am a passive audience. I usually do not comment. I'm okay with whatever the content is being shown, unless and until it is something very outrageous or very violent or very obscene. I hardly comment, and I'm okay with whatever things are being going on in the life or in the country. It's usually what I see. I just simply do not react. They may rely on a narrow range of media outlets or platforms without actively seeking out alternative viewpoints or perspective. Vulnerability to media effects. A passive audience is often seen as vulnerable to the persuasive and influential effects of media content. They may be more susceptible to media manipulation such as advertising messages, propaganda or biased reporting, because they do not critically evaluate or challenge any kind of things. They just accept what is being shown. They have a limited media literacy. They may have lower levels of media literacy, that is the passive audience, which refers to the ability to critically analyze and evaluate the media messages. They may have limited skills in interpreting media content, identifying biases, or understanding the persuasive techniques used by the media producers. The concept of a passive audience serves as a contrast to these alternative views and highlights the traditional perception of audiences as passive recipients of the media messages. However, it's worth noting that in contemporary media environments, the distinction between active and passive audience can be blurred, as individuals can exhibit both active and passive behavior depending on the context and media platform they are engaging with. So now let's understand this through an example. For example, Ella and Bella, they are two siblings, and they are watching the news on the television. The news reporter is providing tips on how to stay healthy. Ella tries to listen to the news reporter's tips actively to follow them. Then she asks her sister Bella to confirm whether do these tips really work or not. In contrast, Bella accepts those tips easily. Here Ella is an active audience who is a critical thinker. Therefore, she carefully focuses on the news presenter dress, the speaking styles, and the message's meaning. On the other hand, Bella just watching the news without focusing on the content of the message. Here, Bella is a passive audience who is a cognitive miser. Therefore, she does not focusing on interpreting the messages. She only focuses on the news reporter's appearance. As a result, she believes that news reporters tips easily. She believes that whatever she is saying is right and she becomes manipulated. Let us look at certain differences that are simply in points. The active audience are interpret and respond to the media context, whereas the passive audience they merely observe the media context. Then active audiences are actively involved with decoding the messages, whereas the passive audience just accept the messages without challenging them. Then active audiences, for example, they play a game, and passive audience just watch a game. Then active audiences are paying full attention to the content, whereas the passive audience pay very less attention to the content and their meaning. Active audience, once giving attention to the content, listening and reading them, they try to form their own opinions. Where the passive audience, they accept the meanings and the opinions as told by media. Active audiences are not directly affected by the messages, whereas passive audiences are directly affected by the messages. Here a question comes, can when they are not listening, why, how they are directly affected by the messages? It is simply that they accept the message, what is being shown to them, and they are affected by it and they accept it. Whereas active audiences, they try to understand the message. They try to critically evaluate the message. That is, they are not directly affected. They try to find out their own meanings. It is very difficult to manipulate the active audience, whereas it is very easy to maintain the passive audience. Like in home also we have two, if they have two children, one is very stubborn, very difficult to deal with, and the second is very easy to go. It's very easy to manipulate the easy go child, whereas it is very difficult to manage a stubborn child because he critically evaluates everything. The same is with the active audience, that is, they are difficult to manipulate, and passive audience, they are easily affected by whatever you are saying. They accept it and you can easily manipulate them, right? Active audiences are the critical thinkers, whereas the passive audience are the cognitive misers, that is, they do not use much of their brains. Active audiences have good schemata. They are good at scheming, plotting, thinking, whereas the passive audience, they are lazy to think. Active audience, they are involved in listening, interpreting the things, whereas the passive audience are just involved in hearing and watching. So this is the difference. I hope through this PPT I have well explained the concept of active and passive audience. So here we complete all the videos related to your subject, that is MAJMC 106 Mass Media and Communication. Thank you all for watching all the videos.